Deborah, and I'm going to be doing the Ready to Love recap review of the exit interview that Cynthia did with a Little Black Book. I checked it out, y'all. I checked it out. Did you get a chance to watch it? If you didn't, we're going to go over it here because I got a lot to talk about when it comes to Miss Cynthia. If you guys have been watching my videos since the reunions, I pretty much told everybody I got duped by Cynthia. I got duped. I called it all wrong. I thought I knew her in some degree, but I wasn't paying attention. And as I went through in my other videos, there were a lot of signs. That I didn't pay attention to. So one of the things I wanted to make sure I did in this, watching this Little Black Book interview, was this time I promised myself I'm not going to do what I did all season. And that is, I'm going to pay more attention to what she says versus what she does, because the actions never lie. The mouth moves, the words may lie, but if you ever watch a person's actions or even know what they do, that typically is where the truth lies. And I didn't do that during the season. I pretty much listened to what Cynthia said. So I want to go over what Cynthia's original story, how I got the story from Cynthia, was that Cynthia often said, well, she was tired of being strong. She's tired of being the strong Black woman. She wanted to be able to let her guard down, and she wanted to be able to have a man come into her life so she could get into her feminine side. That was the whole thing about Cynthia, and I was all for her. I said, yeah, let's do this, girl. Let's do this. Let's get you some new men in your life, men that are going to come along and help you and all these sorts of different things. That's why I thought, Andre would be a good partner for her. Not Andre, Anthony. That's why I thought Anthony would be a good partner to her, because I could already tell that Anthony would be a person that would do nice things for a woman. He was over there rubbing on her corns, rubbing her feet. But let me tell you where I went wrong and what I figured out in this Little Black Book interview. I'm even afraid to tell y'all what conclusion I've come to because I can't even believe I'm about to say it myself. And I know a lot of you guys might be upset when I say it, because there's a lot of Cynthia fans out here. I was one of them. And I'm not saying I'm not one now, but my opinion has definitely changed. I'm going to say that I believe Cynthia is what you call, or what I call, I don't want to call her selfish. I don't even want to call her necessarily self-centered, but I want to call her, maybe the word might be self-focused. And when I say self-focused, it is a person who pretty much all the time thinks about their needs, their emotions, their wants. And then when situations occur, what they typically do is they think of themselves first before they think of others. Is no judgment on it. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. But I believe that's who Cynthia is. And now that I know that about Cynthia, I also understand why she told Anthony that she was emotionally unavailable. Because what she's actually saying is, I don't have the capacity to care about your emotions, your needs, your wants, your desires, because I am focused on my needs, my wants, my desires. And I believe that's the problem with Cynthia. Even when I go back and I hear and I replay her original statement when she says, I want to be able to get into my femininity. I don't want to have to be so tough, so rough, so independent, all these types of things. I originally thought it was because Cynthia was, I imagined, because I made this all up in my head, you guys. That's what I'm saying. That's why I know I got her completely wrong. But when I heard her say that, I thought she was saying, I'm so busy all the time taking care of others that now I want to be in a relationship where there is a person who can take care of me. That's what I heard. But now that I've watched her on a little back book and I listened to her and I put it together with the season, what I've come to realize about Cynthia is she does want to be in her femininity. She does want a man to come in her life and take care of her or cater to her, dote on her, all those types of things. But what Cynthia isn't prepared to do is do the same thing for a man. She's prepared to receive that sort of attention, but what she's unprepared for is to give it back to a man. And this is where she had the problem with Anthony, because although she was ready to receive that from Anthony, where they ran into problems was she didn't have the capability to give that to Anthony. That's what she's saying when she says she's emotionally unavailable. It's sort of like, I don't think that's really the correct word that she should use, because it's more than being emotionally unavailable. It's being unwilling to do things for others that you want done unto you. This is why she wouldn't have made a good partner with Andre. Because one thing about Andre, he was very clear on, he wanted a woman that was going to dote on him, give him praise, give him attention, give him all that. That's why he picked Jeffrey in the first place, because she pretended she was that woman. And Cynthia never would have that capability to do that. She would never have she doesn't have, I don't say never, maybe she'll develop it. But in her nature, she is not actually a nurturing person. She is not the person that's going to nurture another person. So as a result, I can see why Cynthia has attracted men who might be tough, rough, and who also might not have such a nurturing component to them, because they're not going to get that back from Cynthia. And because Cynthia can't do it for a man, that man needs to have not have a high need for it. This is why she didn't work out with Anthony, because Anthony is looking for a more balanced woman. He's looking for a woman that can have that nurturing side, who probably can reciprocate to the type of emotion and feelings he would bring to a relationship. And I don't believe Cynthia has the capacity to do that. Now, when I talk about why she doesn't have it, I don't think she doesn't have it because she only wants to date rough, tough guys. I think it's the opposite. I think Cynthia's innate personality, since she was a little girl, is one that thinks of life as surviving, winning, because she even told us she was competitive, and she's always been that way. I'm going to go through some things Cynthia talked about. Well, when I start to put together the moves she has made in her life, even the way she describes situations in her life, like I said, I'm watching what she said she did. I'm watching what she said she did, not just her glamorizing something. It tends to point to a person who has always looked out for herself, who has always done what's best for her, not necessarily what's best for other people or worked as a unit. The first thing she did when she got on this little black book, and I'm looking at my notes, she said all her life she had to fight. That's what Cynthia said. Reminds me of Color Purple. All my life I had to fight. So when I first heard her say that, I was like, oh, okay. So did Cynthia, have a rough life? She had to fight. So she talks about all her life she had to fight. She says that she is one of 7 children. That's what she said. And she was the youngest. So the first thing I said to myself, oh, that's interesting, because typically the youngest in the family has things better than the older ones. But in Cynthia's mind, in her mind, she sees herself as the one that is, I don't want to use the word victim, but she sees herself as the one that's at a disadvantage. So when she looks at herself in a family unit with 7 older siblings, she says to herself that she is the least advantaged one, being the youngest one. She's the least advantaged. When most people would say to Cynthia, no, you're probably the most advantaged one because you're the baby. But hey, we may not agree on that, all of you listening, but we're going to keep going, because there's a lot of these situations where I started to realize that Cynthia sees situations only through her eyes. She doesn't see it through the perspective of others that might be in the same situation with her. The next thing she says, after she says she was the youngest of 7 children, she then goes on to say the reason why she had it so hard was because she was the first American born here in the United States, and all her brothers and sisters were supposedly born in Haiti. So then I say, well, that's interesting, Cynthia, because considering that you were born here in America, it sounds as if you were born in much better conditions than your siblings in Haiti. So why would you say you have it worse than your siblings? Typically, it would be said that because you were born here in the States with probably a lot more offered to you at a young age, you would have the better situation. That confused me. I said, wow, she sure is looking at herself, her emotions, her feelings, but it's really not in necessarily maybe a good context of others. Then she goes on to say, well, I did have a brother who was born here too with her. Well, then that means you weren't the youngest, which means you didn't have it the worst, Cynthia. So now I'm looking at Cynthia a little cockeyed because like I told you, in this interview, I'm paying a lot more attention. I'm not just eating the candy that Cynthia is dishing out, because now what I want to do is I want to hear the contradictions into what she says and what she walks upon, so I can come to a better understanding of just who Cynthia is. So then she goes on to say that at some point in time, I don't know, maybe she was in the 3rd grade, that's what she said, her siblings from Haiti moved to the United States. So she's here with her brother, and her siblings that were born in Haiti move over when she is in the 3rd grade. And what she says is, I didn't get along with any of them. Here we go. So now I'm saying, once again, she didn't get along with any of them because she didn't want to do anything the way anyone else wanted to do things. So once again, it's no judgment, but what I'm continually seeing is a person who is self-focused, self-centered in some ways, and wants to do things their way, and they're not as concerned about other people's feelings, emotion, plights, any of that. She's seeing it through her eyes only. So she says she didn't really get along with her siblings. Not at all, not one bit. She says that one of her models that she wanted to model herself after was Claire Huxtable of the Cosby Show. And I'm thinking to myself, Cynthia. Next thing you know, she tells us that at one point in time, she joined the LDS church, the Mormon church. But the reason why she joined the Mormon church was not because of the faith or the religion, but it was because she met some people from the Mormon church and they did fun things. And she knew that the only way she could get out the house and do fun things with people was to tell her mother she was doing it with these church people, and that was the way she got to do things. So once again, Cynthia did what was best for her to get what she wanted. It didn't mean that she really wanted to be a Mormon. It didn't mean that she was really committed to the faith. She used the Mormon church to get what she really wanted, which was to be able to go on a camping trips or, I don't know, field trips. Like I said, a lot of the things that I'm hearing from Cynthia is just like that tarot card reader is she is focused, she's determined to get what she wants, and she's willing to do that, which means there leaves little room for her to care about another person. It leaves very little room for her to care about another person. So I'm going to keep going. She then talked about how she said, I didn't really have a daddy. I grew up in a single parent household. This is what she said. Her first comment was, I grew up in a single parent household. So now I'm thinking, okay, so your mother was here in the U.S. It was you and your brother, and you had siblings, but originally they were back in Haiti, but then they moved to the United States. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, that must mean that the mother had to raise all these kids by herself. Well, no. Within a couple of sentences, Cynthia tells us, well, I did have a stepdad. Well, then you didn't grow up in a single parent household, Cynthia. If you had a stepdad, you didn't grow up in a single parent household. But Cynthia says, well, he was only focused on his kids. So here we are again. Here we are again. So now Cynthia is saying that she was probably thinking of what she wants, what she needs, and she's made the determination that the father, which is the stepdad, only cared for the sibling. This could be her truth, and I think it is the way she sees things. It is her truth. Her truth is that she had a stepfather, but all he did was dote on his kid, and he neglected her as maybe her and her siblings as a stepchild. This is what I'm thinking. But once again, I have to put this in context of it seems as if every situation Cynthia is describing, she keeps describing situations where she feels she didn't get something, she wanted more, she was willing to receive something from someone, but I don't hear her practicing a lot of empathy, a sympathy, concern about other people. It's really, really self-focused. So then she says, let me go on with what the rest of my note says. So then she says, she starts talking about her own biological father. So I go, oh, so you had a stepdad here in the U.S. Well, where was your biological father? So she says she had a wonderful biological father, but the biological father moved back to Haiti. So the scenario becomes her biological father lived in Haiti. Her stepfather was here in the U.S. And the way she describes that situation is her biological father took care of kids that weren't even his children. So she missed out on that too. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying that none of this is the truth, people, but what I'm pointing out is a pattern of when you look at situations and you look at scenarios, you're more interested in yourself than you are in others, which goes back when I said, she said, I want to rest in my femininity. I want a man who will help me, dote on me, take care of me, let me rest a little bit. But what we never did have here a lot of was what was she going to do for Anthony? And in the end, what we find out is that's where she couldn't do. She couldn't do for Anthony. She couldn't match his needs because, as she said, she's emotionally unavailable. She's basically, what she's saying is she's emotionally bankrupt, which means I don't have enough emotion, feelings, care, and concern for you, Anthony, because I'm more focused on my needs. And she said it in pretty much a lot of ways. That's what she said. And she said she wished she weren't that way. She wished she were a person who could feel as if it was important to hear and listen to Anthony or any other woman. But in her mind, she doesn't matter. She doesn't care. She said she wished that it were important to her. She wished that she had a real, a genuine concern and desire, but she didn't. Now, some people might say, oh, that's just because she didn't like Anthony. Nope, it's not because of Anthony. It's who Cynthia is. It's the reason why she didn't pair up well with Andre. It's the reason why she has to date men like James, because James doesn't have probably a big need to be heard emotionally and or have that sort of emotional attachment to a woman. So as a result, Cynthia can be in a relationship like that and there's nothing required of her. So Cynthia's got a dilemma. She talks about the man that she wants, but the man that Cynthia describes that she wants would not want her. No man who is willing to provide that type of emotional support and need to a woman is going to be with a woman who can't reciprocate that. So she's got a dilemma. She's either going to have to keep dating the hardcore Jameses of the world so that they don't call her on her bull crap, or so that they don't require more of her emotionally than she has to give. Or she's going to have to learn to give to men like the Anthonys of the world and other men who want some emotional and nurturing sides of a woman. She is in a pickle. But I tell you, I lost a little bit of hope with Cynthia because I don't know if she's willing and able to make those changes in her life that she would need to have the man that she talks about she wants to have. She talks about all her life she had to fight. She talks about even people in her family would tell her, there's no need for you to be this tough. I believe that Cynthia, when she talks about fighting, Cynthia talks about fighting to do what she wants to do. It is fighting. I almost believe Cynthia creates competition and fights in situations where she doesn't even need to. She told us that she was competitive. Remember when they went to that little obstacle course with everyone and she was beating down all the men in the obstacle course, and we're thinking, girl, this is supposed to be a date. Why do you need to be competing to this level? Because I think that's what Cynthia does. I think Cynthia likes to win. And when you want to win all the time, guess what you're not concerned with? You're not concerned that another person is losing. You're not concerned about another person's feelings, because what you're concentrated on is winning. That's what you're concentrating on. And when you turn every situation, even in relationships, into competitions, then guess what? You're self-focused, you're self-centered, all for you to win, which means you don't have a lot of emotional capacity for your partner. That's what that means. She lodged another complaint where she evaluates what she got and what she didn't get. And she says, in this Ready to Love season, all the men learned a lot about us, but we didn't learn anything about them. I said, well, what do you mean, Cynthia? You guys both learned about each other. According to Cynthia, because the men got to meet, I guess, the women's exes, she felt as if the men learned all this stuff about them, but they learned nothing. Well, we said, hey, you got to meet the men's family. But what Cynthia focuses on, not that she got to meet the men's family, what Cynthia focuses on is what she didn't get, which is she didn't get to meet the men's exes. I hope you guys are getting what I'm saying. And that is, Cynthia likes to win. She likes to stack her deck. And when she doesn't get everything that she wants, she focuses on that because she wants to win. She even talked about how in the Haitian community or in her culture, it's kind of not normal for people to go away and move out the house until I guess maybe they're a lot older, maybe when they're going to go off and get married. What Cynthia said was she was the rebel. What Cynthia said is even when her older siblings were still living at the home or in the family compound, she was the one that packed her bags and left. Lots of people say that's a go-getter. I would say that's a go-getter. But what it also points out is a person who is always willing to choose themselves over others. And like I said, I'm not judging it. I'm just saying that her actions point to all the time that Cynthia is willing to choose herself all the time, which can put her in the category of being self-centered, self-focused, selfish in this category. I'm not saying she's all those things, but when you listen to what she says she does in life, the choices she has made, she has a real ability to disregard others' needs, wants, desires, and to choose herself, just like the soothsayer said. Cynthia says she had a significant other man after James. He wasn't her only significant relationship. She said she had another one after James. And as she looks back on that relationship, I think she has a level of regret. And I think the level of regret is around the same area. I think Cynthia has a desire to be in a certain type of relationship with a certain type of man. She talks about how she always admired Claire Huxtable from the Cosbys, that she wanted that to be her life. But yet I'm not for sure that Cynthia has the skills that Claire Huxtable had. I don't know if Cynthia has that side of her that allowed Claire Huxtable to create that environment for herself. I think Cynthia looks at things and she says she wants it. She wants to invite it into her life, but she doesn't necessarily see what she would have to do differently for that thing to want to stay in her life. And I think that's Cynthia's biggest problem. I think Cynthia cannot match the man she's describing that she wants to have now. And as a result, that man would not be interested in Cynthia. And this is why I believe that I got so duped by Cynthia, because what Cynthia described, I assumed she was ready for it. She even talks about how Anthony said to her, after Anthony met James, he said to Cynthia How does a woman like you be with a man like him? And that's what maybe a lot of us would think, that Cynthia was describing one person and we couldn't quite understand why that woman she's describing would want a man like James. But now that I know who Cynthia is and I get into this area of, like I said, self-centered and self-focused, James is actually the exact type of man that Cynthia would be with. Because the Jameses of the world are not going to require a whole lot of emotional attention from Cynthia. They're not. They're not going to require it because they're not even going to give it to her. So when she's running around saying she wants it, she does want it because the men that she's with don't have enough for her. They're not giving it to her. So she is at a deficit. She wants to receive it. But the problem is she doesn't have the emotional depth, energy, capacity to give that same type of energy and emotional support to a man. And that's the problem. There was a lot of times in this interview where Cynthia spent a lot of time trying to deny what we saw on the screen. This was the other part that kind of bothered me about Cynthia's interview. She kept talking about how it's editing, it's editing, it's editing. Because what she was trying to tell us was that at no point in time was Andre ever her number one. Anthony was always her number one. I wasn't one of the belief that I thought she wanted to be with Andre. I never thought that Andre was her number one. At the time, I was thinking that Anthony was her number one, and she was just playing along with Andre and using him somewhat to stay on the show. And that's actually what I still believe. I still believe that Anthony was the one that she wanted to be with, and that in a lot of ways she was using Andre and finessing Andre so that he would vote for her on the screen. I think it was pretty clear on Andre's end that Cynthia wasn't for him. And I also think it was pretty clear that Andre wasn't for him, because Cynthia knew that there'd be no way she could meet the emotional component that Andre needed. It was pretty clear that Andre needed a lot of stroking, and I know that Cynthia knew she wouldn't be up to that job. If she didn't have the emotional capacity for Anthony, she knew darn well she didn't have it for Andre, because Andre is even more work than Anthony. But I think the reason why she was spending so much time trying to make us believe that it was all editing, because they didn't show her connection with Anthony a lot. Well, this is where I differ from Cynthia, because even though they may not have showed all of Cynthia's connections or Cynthia's dates or how strong the connection was with Anthony, the editing doesn't take words out of Cynthia's mouth. You see, Cynthia was trying to make us believe that because they showed more scenes with her and Andre, that meant that they were trying to push a narrative that Andre was her number one. No, I wasn't just going off the number of scenes. I was also going out the words that came out of Cynthia's mouth. And that, my friend, could not be edited. She said those things. So this idea that it's all editing and it wasn't her, I don't believe it. But once again, this goes back to what I'm saying about Cynthia. She's crafty with her words, and in a lot of ways, she's doing what I said before. She's focusing on her own emotions, her own beliefs, her own way she sees things, and she disregards what other people see, hear, and feel. So I'm saying, well, she can't disregard what I know I saw on the screen. And I'm not just saying that I knew that she was having some sort of involvement with Andre simply because they were showing the scenes. I listened to the words that she said. And like I said, even in my basic understanding, I knew that she wanted to be with Anthony. I was the one that believed that. But I'm not going to believe this scenario that Cynthia is trying to push, that it was all editing and that they totally gave her a bad edit. In fact, the more I watched this interview, they gave Cynthia a good edit. They gave Cynthia a good edit because in the background, what's going through Cynthia's head, to be honest with you, is a lot worse than what I actually saw on screen. So I would say that Cynthia got a good edit. Cynthia went so far as to say that there was Andre wouldn't be able to pick Cynthia because she wasn't available to even be picked. I said, Cynthia, what are you talking about? I believe that one of the problems Cynthia had with Anthony is that there came a point in time when Anthony started questioning some of the things that Cynthia was saying and doing to Andre after he was able to see some of the clips and some of the tape. I think Andre came back and he even started questioning whether or not he was Cynthia's first choice, because the tape and the footage was saying something different. And I think Cynthia has spent a whole lot of time trying to clean it up for us, the audience. And I think she was doing a lot of that cleaning it up with Anthony. And when Anthony was questioning about her and asking it of him, asking it of her, basically, she didn't have time to tend to his emotions. That's what I believe. When she starts talking about when we were having our difficulties and I didn't handle Anthony right, I didn't handle the situation right. When you hear a lot of what she's talking about, it sounds like when Anthony wanted to talk to her about situations of the heart, which might have been over some of the scenes she had with Andre and how she was interacting with Andre, that might have triggered some emotion in Anthony, Cynthia used the excuse, what's the big deal? What's the problem? Why do you care about that? And basically, she blew off his emotions because, like I said, Cynthia doesn't really care a lot about other people's emotions. She really only cares about her outcomes, what she wants, what's important to her. And this is where she runs into a lot of problems in the relationship. They even talked about this clip, which I think was one of the first times I even saw Cynthia get nasty, kind of talking shade about Jeffrey. And Little Black Book asked her the question about that. And she kind of had, to be honest with you, she kind of had a little nasty attitude about it. Like she didn't even want to talk about it. She talked about how she was mad that they brought her in there for that scene because supposedly it was a makeup scene, because remember it was a confessional. And it wasn't a confessional that was done in the moment during that time. It was, they brought her in for that confessional the day before the reunion. And she felt the last thing she wanted to talk about was Jeffrey, because I don't care nothing about Jeffrey. That's what she said. So she was irritated by it. And Coach O kept trying to push her and say, well, if you was irritated by it, you must have felt some kind of way about Jeffrey or whatever. She was, oh, no, I didn't. And he kept trying to push her to admit that she felt some kind of way, but she wouldn't admit it. She wouldn't admit it. And it was clear she obviously felt some kind of way because she said some nasty words, but she tried to act like she said nasty words because they pulled her in and she was getting her hair done and they made her cut her hair appointment short. I said, Cynthia is showing a whole another side of herself. And let me tell you, she got a good edit. She got a darn good edit. She said she didn't have no beef with Jeffrey because she's not in competition with no woman. Oh, yes, you are. You are in competition with another woman, and you knew you were in competition with another woman, not just Jeffrey, but lots of other women. Did y'all hear that Morgan had met Anthony on a dating app prior to even coming on this show? I watched Morgan's exit interview with Carlos King, and I'm going to do a recap on that later on. But I found out on that exit interview that Morgan and Anthony had a date, or I don't know if it was a phone date or an actual date. They had met on a dating app prior to even being on Ready to Love. I'm quite sure that Cynthia knew just how many people were interested in Anthony. Morgan later didn't become interested in Anthony once they really got to talk, but Cynthia didn't know that in the beginning. There were a lot of women who were interested in Anthony. And like I said, this part about Cynthia, her competitive side, she wants to win, and that her chase is built a lot on what she wanted in her life, but she really wasn't able to meet and satisfy the man like Anthony. For me, it's all pointing to self-focus and sort of a self-centeredness. That's what I'm getting. She said her connection with Anthony was strong. They talked every single day, all the time. Well, here we go. You talked every single day, all the time during the 6 weeks of filming, and then after the show was over, you ain't got nothing for him. Nothing. So she worked real hard at working to get what she want, but in the end, she couldn't deliver all the things that she was promising, not a one. And that became the sorrow and the heartbreak for her, because I really do believe she would love to receive all those great things from a man like Anthony, but she can't satisfy a man like Anthony. They talked a lot about this back to Anthony on the show, this detachment that showed this ability to, why were you sitting on the couch with your back turned to Anthony the whole time? And what she said was because she was too emotional and she didn't want to break down and cry in front of Anthony. And so she used her body, turning her body as a shield so that she wouldn't have to look at Anthony. That's fine if that's what she wants to say. I believe that another part of the reason why is because I do believe Cynthia is emotionally detached from people. And what Cynthia doesn't do, I think what Cynthia is not able to do is she's not able to realize that that body language that she had in and of itself is emotional detachment. Because everyone knows that you shouldn't turn your back to a person that you're talking to. And it really was contradictory, because in one way her back was turned, but in another way she was peeking over her shoulder or smiling at Anthony. So it's really contradictory. I'm turning my back to you, but I'm also turning around and smiling at you. It does point to a person who doesn't understand how their actions signify detachment and inability to emotionally connect with a person. That's what it says. I don't think that she was mad at Anthony. When you just look at it, that's what you think. I don't think she was mad at Anthony. I don't think that it was because she didn't want to be with Anthony. I think it's because Cynthia is so used to doing things and taking care of herself, and she doesn't think about what she does or what she says, how it affects other people. And I think that turning that back to Andre is the same thing, because a person who gives any thought to another person's feelings of emotions would never turn their back to another person. If a person wanted to care for another person, you would never turn your back to them like that. But Cynthia, she doesn't think like that. That isn't priority in her thinking. Her priority in her thinking was to take care of herself. She turned her back to Anthony so that she could take care of her own emotional needs, which was she didn't want to cry. She didn't give a darn that turning her back to Anthony would be disrespectful. You hear what I'm saying? She turned her back to protect herself, to take care of herself, her own emotional needs, and she didn't think that by doing that, it could also hurt or harm another person. And that goes back to what I say, that Cynthia is self-focused and self-centered. I don't want to say selfish, because I'm sure she does a lot of things for a lot of people. But when it comes to whose emotional needs is she going to nurture and take care of first at all times, it's going to be her own. And that doesn't mean that she's going to have some extra for anyone else in her life. I don't know how she ever could date a man like Anthony. She's going to have to continue dating the Jameses of the world, because they're the only ones who are going to sit and be in a relationship with a person who only thinks about themselves and doesn't think about someone else's emotional needs. She said when it was with Anthony, one of the things that bothered her was he didn't have the ability to let things go. He wanted to talk about things. He wanted her to understand how he was feeling, his point of view. And what Cynthia wanted to do was forget about it. I don't want to talk about it. Why can't you let it go? Because she doesn't have the emotional need. Other people do. She doesn't have the emotional need, which means she doesn't know how to cater to it, and other people do. So she said that was a big problem in their relationship. And what she said was it was best that they break up, because if they didn't break up, she said she thought the fights would get really nasty. She thought they could get really nasty because she's probably been here before. She knows how it ends. And she says she knows how it ends, and she's done it before. She knows how to stop talking to people when she needs to. She knows how to cut off the emotional umbilical cord when she needs to. The problem is, I'm not sure that she even attaches that umbilical cord emotionally to a man. She talks about she can cut it real quick. It's probably never really attached. Not at all. She says one of her greatest accomplishments being on the show was she was able to see herself. That's what she said. She said one of the greatest things that came out of this show is that she was able to see herself. But right behind that, she said she deserves to be loved correctly. I said, oh, good Lord, Cynthia. Of course you deserve to be loved correctly. But guess what? Anyone in a relationship with you also deserves to be loved correctly. So once again, Cynthia's focused on what she needs and what she wants, but she's not investing in how does she nurture the other person in the relationship. She's focused on she deserves to be loved correctly. You sure do, Cynthia. You sure do. But so does the other person in a relationship with you. And until you get to a point where their emotions and their needs are just as important as your own, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be a problem. She says she's working on it. And if she can get it together, or she going to run back and double back on Anthony because she feels as if Anthony has what she needs. The problem is she's not equipped to give Anthony what he needs. But I understand it a lot better, y'all, now. I understand it a lot better. My opinion has definitely changed with Cynthia. And I guess the question is Cynthia ready to love? And she's ready to be loved, but she's not ready to give love. That's it, y'all. Talk to you later. Bye.